Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Planning Control Committee, 2nd of October 2025. My name is Jerry Pearce. I'm chair of the committee. Start with any apologies. There's no apologies, but we're missing Councillor Morgan McGeehan at the moment. Any late items? There are none. Declarations of interest. Councillor Holmes, Councillor Patterson, then Councillor Kerr. Stephen will take your...
Thank you, Chair. 6.1, just to make it clear that I'm approaching it with an open mind. I'm well aware of the application as being a ward councillor, but as I say, approach this, as always, with an open mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, regarding the application for 20 Welney Close, I'd just like to give a response to the applicant's agent's concerns regarding me taking part in determining this application. I had referred the previous application to committee due to concerns that were upheld by our planning officers and by the inspector on appeal. But this is a new application and I refute the suggestion that I have been involved in leading the opposition to it or done anything that would compromise my ability to take part tonight. So I'll be approaching this application with an open mind, and having sought legal advice, I am satisfied I'm able to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Morris.
Come in on that, thank you. Yes, I've given advice to both councillors on this matter. We did have the agent write in suggesting that both councillors should not take part. I'm satisfied, having been in correspondence with councillors, that they can. I think the points of issues that the agent actually raised was first that the councillors had effectively been leading on opposition to this application, which, as you hear, the councillors say that they haven't. Second point was that they'd been lobbied by neighbours. Well, lobbying by neighbours itself doesn't lead to a particular issue. It's only if commitments were made by the councillors to support the neighbours unconditionally, that would lead to the matter. The third item was directed strictly to Councillor Patterson, and it was the fact, I think he summed it up very well tonight, but it was the fact that he, prior to being part of the Planning Control Committee, he had referred a previous application for council to consider and had objected to that. It's a similar application for the same site, but it is a different application. It's also, as Councillor Patterson pointed out, the committee refused that application, and it was refused on appeal as well. So there was merit, certainly, behind referring it to the committee. I think there's, in terms of, as I say, the issues are different, and provided members approach the matter with an open mind, and then that's fine. I mean, it's rather tantamount to suggest that there is a predetermination if application came back to committee that the committee had refused. It would, if you take that same approach, it would suggest that members who'd already considered that previous application, which probably was the case in that, should not take part, and because they're predetermined. So I'm satisfied that both councillors tonight, given the explanation, can take part tonight.
Thanks, Stephen.
Sorry.
Thanks, Stephen. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Chair. And it's the same application, Welney Close, and in my case, I've taken advice, and the advice is that I probably do better to leave the room at that occasion and declare an interest.
Thanks, Lucy. Go for us. Did you have your hand up as well? No. Must be a figment of my imagination then. Thank you, Lucy. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on 4th September 2025. Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Item 5, minutes of the meeting of the Conservation and Heritage Advisory Committee. Thank you very much, Councillor Bolton. Just before we start, Upstairs, it is the viewing gallery. If you can keep comments down to a very, very bare minimum, please. You're there to view, not to comment. So thank you, if you could. Thank you. Move to item 6 on the agenda, application to be considered. Start with 6.1, 20 Welney Close, Mickleover. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks to extend an existing bungalow by raising the ridge and accommodating rooms in the roof space, along with 2 front gabled glazed projections. This iteration follows a previous refusal, as you'll note in your report at item 2. That refusal went to appeal, and I felt before it went to appeal that it was far too big and out of character. Went to appeal, and at appeal the inspector felt that it was a considerable increase in scale and mass of the property would appear significantly out of character with the scale of the adjoining properties. Following a site meeting, the proposal now reduces that previous bulk and scale. The dominant ridge that was refused for the previous scheme was 8.86 metres tall. The now proposed ridge height is 6.22 metres, so a 2.6 metre reduction in ridge height, so they can get the accommodation in the roof, but it's not a big, bulky roof that we saw previously. That proposed ridge is now only 1.32 metres above the ridge height of the existing property. The existing property is at 4.9 metres. So that new solution to achieve rooms in the roof space and accommodation in that roof space is only in old money, because I use old money, 4 foot 4 inches more than the existing ridge height. Now, being located in the Mickleover Conservation Area, this reduced dominance, in my considered opinion, preserves the appearance of the conservation area. The previous iteration caused significant harm to the character of the street scene and failed to preserve the conservation area as a result. There are nearby listed buildings, but the previous inspector concluded on that much larger scheme that it would not harm and therefore preserve the setting of those listed buildings. This is a smaller scheme. For this amended proposal, the planning merits are balanced. Like the previous inspector, I find that the proposal would affect a limited part of the conservation area, and with any impact on the conservation area relatively localised, and therefore the proposal would cause less than substantial harm to the significance of the designated heritage asset. Now, the planning framework therefore advises that we should weigh the harm to the conservation area from this reduced scheme in the balance against the public benefits. Now, those benefits are expressed on page 11 of your report, and particularly the absolute need for larger family dwellings. Of course, modern building methods would also make the habitable space in the roof much more thermally efficient. That said, and in conclusion, it's a matter of balance, where I believe the applicant has significantly reduced his aspirations, recognising the location, the setting, and the previous inspector's decision to arrive at a balanced solution that at only, as I said before, 1.32 metres above the existing ridge, 4 inches, could sit comfortably within the street scene without significant detriment. Hence the recommendation to approve the application. Chair, we have speakers.
Thanks, Paul. First speaker, Mr. Mudassar Nazir. Thank you, sir. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. This application is a follow-up to a previous application which was initially recommended for approval by planning officers, but ended up getting rejected on appeal after officers withdrew support. The main difference between the new design and the previous design is a big decrease in height of 2.5 metres. Our design only proposes to increase the height of our bungalow by just over 1 metre to create a dormer bungalow with a single-storey extension at the back. We have been through pre-planning with this design, and worked with planning to produce a design that we were told was acceptable. This included producing street views showing exactly how the design would fit in with surrounding properties. Welney Close is made up of 16 properties, 13 large double-storey detached houses and just 3 bungalows, none of the properties have any historical or architectural value. Our property is located at the end of the cul-de-sac and is a single-storey detached bungalow on a large plot. It is hidden from the road at the front by other properties and the fact that it sits at 90 degrees to the road and is set back from the road by a distance of about 23 metres. It is one of just 2 properties on our road that is in the conservation area. A few years ago, our neighbouring bungalow, which is also in the conservation area, had its plot split into 2 and a new modern designed, white-rendered, 2-storey, 4-bedroomed detached house had planning permission granted and was built in the bungalow's previous garden. This property sits around 15 metres from historically important properties on the hollow, whereas our property sits about 45 metres from the nearest property on the hollow. 9 trees were removed when that property was built, whereas we will be removing none. We have had an independent conservation officer report done which states that our extension will have no effect on the conservation area. Just recently, the only other bungalow on Welney Close also completed a new extension, which includes a nearly 19-metre long side extension, as well as 2 new gables at the front. So to summarise, all we are asking for is to be able to increase the height of our bungalow by just over 1 metre to create bedroom space so our children can each have their own rooms, and to build a single-storey extension at the back, which will not be visible to anyone but us. The fact that our current design has been reduced in height by 2.5 metres and will only be just over 1 metre taller than our existing bungalow means any concerns regarding massing and street scene being affected are unfounded. The distance from historical properties on the hollow, along with no visibility of our property from the hollow, means conservation concerns are also unfounded. And finally, the fact that out of the only 2 other bungalows on Welney Close, one has had a new 2-storey modern designed house built in its garden in the conservation area, and the other has just completed a 90-metre long side extension along with 2 new front gables, all mean that officer recommendation should be followed and planning permission granted.
Thank you very much. Bang on time. Well done. Go for Mr. Harris, please. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Application discussions have taken place, but have failed to resolve many of the issues that led to that dismissal. Officers have suggested scope for sensitive extensions at ground floor level, but have been ignored. This proposal, albeit without the stepped roofline, is basically the same, just dressed in brick. The increased height of 52 inches is made worse by the increased footprint, which is double the footprint of the existing bungalow. Size, scale and massing were unacceptable last year. Why are they acceptable now? The local housing needs assessment identified the need for both larger houses and bungalows. So converting a bungalow into a 5-bedroom house in a conservation area where it causes harm is not a public benefit. Compared to the bungalows either side, the proposed 2-storey house would be significantly out of character in terms of height, scale, massing and detail design, with the higher ground level exacerbating the disparity. It already sits 1.5 metres above my property. If approved, the apex of the new roof would be 8 metres above me. That is overshadowing, overbearing, overly prominent and dominant, and sets a dangerous precedent. It would disrupt what the inspector described as a positive feature, namely the steady rhythm of low-rise bungalows across the top of Ingham Drive and Welney Close. Mr. Chairman, 28 households have objected. We're not against improvement or modernisation. Mr. Rabindranath Nambi at 22 Welney Close was granted planning permission for significant extensions without a single objection. Why? Because it was kept at low level. Finally, there's the principle of fairness. The Conservation and Urban Design Officers asked for many changes to reduce the harm, particularly the removal of the 2-storey gables that sit forward of the existing build line by almost 1 metre. The applicant has refused. If you or I were told by the council to make changes, we'd have to comply. It's not right that someone can just ignore expert advice, commit avoidable harm, and still expect permission. Councillors, not enough change has been made. The inspectorate and consultants have all been ignored. The inspector noted there were no public benefits to the last proposal. There are none to this. And so I respectfully ask you to support local residents, uphold your own policies, protect the Mickletover Conservation Area and dismiss this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Harris. Councillor Alison Holmes. Alison, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. As we've already heard, this site lies in the Mickletover Conservation Area. Last year, this council refused a similar proposal and the inspector upheld that decision, citing the harmful scale, massing and design of a 2-storey extension. I don't believe that those concerns have yet been addressed. While the applicant swapped render to brick, which is a positive, the core issues still remain. The proposal's bulky, top-heavy form on an elevated plot disrupts the bungalow character of Welney Close, and the officer's report highlights ongoing concerns, namely, the design is still too dominant with scope for further refinement. The gables and dormers remain oversized compared to neighbouring bungalows. The apex windows and window arrangement are out of character and the elevation looks unbalanced. The ridge is still raised with large projecting gables and multiple dormers making the building appear out of place. The conservation and urban design officers advise smaller dormers, better window arrangement and sympathetic detailing, but the applicant hasn't done that, demonstrating the harm is avoidable, but it hasn't been addressed. Local plan policies CP3 and CP4 demand high-quality design that respects context. Policy CP20 and Section 72 of the Planning Act require us to preserve or enhance the conservation area's character. The NPPF emphasises giving great weight to heritage harm, and this needs to be avoided. Clear public benefits are needed. This proposal converts one bungalow into a large family home, not new housing. Whilst this meets some housing needs, it removes a smaller, accessible bungalow, which are in great demand. In summary, the reason for last year's refusal and appeal dismissal remain unresolved. Professional officer advice has been ignored. Statutory duties and local policies point to refusal. I therefore urge you to uphold policy, protect our conservation area and refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Alison. Over to you, Paul, for a couple of pointers.
Just a couple of points to pick up. I don't think the footprint is the issue here. Principally, it's the impact on the street scene. James, can you go to the before and afters, previous? So with that, it's the decision maker's choice. Has enough been done? Has enough of a reduction to the ridge line been done from the previous refusal? Given the small increase in the ridge height over the existing bungalow, go to one of the photos, James, of only 1.32 metres. So the picture on the left of the screen with the white garage door, that's the property, tucked at the back, with a just over a metre high, 1.32 metre ridge. The ridge goes up 1.32 metres, and it has those two gables on the front, which do add attention, draw attention to it. Is that sufficiently bad enough to refuse? I concluded not. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. Committee, any comments?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it is a consideration on what has been refused before and what officers have worked with the applicant in pre-app to make amendments, and there have been changes. One of the major ones is switching to brick, which was one of the concerns and one of the issues that led to refusal at appeal. But has enough been done? Overshadowing and overlooking, is it now acceptable? The scale and massing, so the ridge, the gables, the dormers, I still think are dominant. And the key is here that it's still an elevated plot, so that dominance is pronounced. I think I would say it's top heavy. And on the point about availability of family homes, well, the counterpoint to that would be, if you want to consider this, is that bungalows are in great need as well. And, you know, if you think about this being a bungalow application, officers would be suggesting that there's a great need for bungalows. So, you know, it's also a balance in terms of the type of housing that is delivered. What concerns me a lot about this is the conservation, the impact on the conservation area and conservation officers. And I think that's an area that just has not been resolved. I don't know why there hasn't been a willingness to maybe directly resolve some of those issues. Officers may be able to offer us some insight into the dialogue that potentially did or didn't happen. But I think there's the issues with the impact on the conservation area haven't, in my view, been resolved and remain significant issues that led to the previous refusal. But I would welcome officers' comments on that. So in terms of the street scene, is it in keeping? Is it out of keeping? Well, it's currently a bungalow, which is in keeping and in character of the urban design. And I think that that's the big issue here, is to see this big change from a bungalow to a much bigger proposal and what that impact would be. And I think it's a significantly negative one. But yeah, the non-engagement is the ability to actually adopt mitigations, and the non-engagement to do that is a big issue for me. So I'll probably come back, but I'd like to know a little bit more about that from officers, please.
Thanks, Matt. Paul?
As Councillor Holmes knows, whenever we get a planning application, we always try and lower the hurdles. There's always going to be tension, and we try and lower those hurdles with negotiation. That's why it takes so long in the planning process. Most schemes need negotiation. We try and improve the mundane or refuse those that are unacceptable. We heard from one of the speakers that, I think it was the applicant, that the previous scheme was recommended for approval. Yes, my officer recommended approval, and I said no, that previous scheme was unacceptable. It was far too big. We refused it under delegated authority, and because there was no real room to manoeuvre, and we were supported at appeal. Then the applicant turns to me and said, well, what can we do? Well, you need to reduce it. Read the inspector's comments, reduce the sheer size of the proposal, which they've done. And I think, to answer Councillor Holmes's comment, they've reduced it as much as possible whilst retaining what they want or need to achieve for accommodation on the site. So they've reduced, basically they've said, right, we've reduced the hurdles putting forward, and we can't go any further. So that was the impasse. So here we are at Planning Committee, and like I said, for me, it's the difference between the current proposal on the screen or the one below. The one below was, the grey one was refused and upheld at appeal. The brick one above is the current proposal. Is that acceptable? Yes or no? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. Do you want to come back, Matt?
Yeah, I asked about the engagement on conservation grounds and what happened there, because it's mentioned that suggestions or concerns of the conservation officers haven't been addressed?
Thank you. When we get the conservation officer's comments, we sent those, as well as the urban design officer's comments, to the applicant. These will go in the report. You need to address these. They were reliant, I believe, on their own conservation officer, their own report that was done to support their application, and relied on that rather than our own conservation officer. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Matt, again.
Sorry, and finally, I believe is there a care facility nearby? Is that something which you're aware of, or officers aware of, in terms of potential impact on that?
I am not. That's news to me. I'm not aware of a care facility in the vicinity. I did a site visit yesterday and drove up the street, which is relatively quiet. I didn't notice there was a care facility. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. Any others, committee? Councillor Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've obviously read the report and listened diligently to our speakers this evening. Thank them for turning up. We all know in planning, you're never going to please everybody all the time. We are here to make a decision. And the fact is that our decision may upset other people, which is a common occurrence at planning committee. Page 2 of the report lists the objections, and most of those in the list aren't planning considerations. So, you know, we can't put devaluation of property into a planning application because it doesn't exist, and a lot of those reasons there don't form within our policies. I do take on board the Mickleover Conservation Area. I drove down there the other day, quiet suburb, in my view, and we do diligently as a council preserve our conservation areas and abide by, obviously, the relevant policies. But I think, reading the report, listening to what's been said, the Mickleover Conservation Area is preserved in this case, in my view. From the previous application, the scale has been reduced, the ridge height has been reduced, the applicant has worked with officers and obviously taken on board the result and the outcome of the appeal, and I think that's the sensible approach. In my view, the conditions as laid out in front of us are sensible, and I think this application should be agreed this evening.
Councillor Bonson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's been an assertion that the application is the same, and I just think it very much isn't. You know, the height has been addressed, the materials have been addressed, so that demonstrates that the applicant has been working with officers to put forward a more acceptable scheme. I just wanted to revisit with Paul, if possible. I think you said that the appeal inspector's comments around the impact on the conservation assets, he said that there wasn't an impact. If you can just come back to me with comments on that, just to clear that up in my mind. But I think the main issue here is the impact from the road, and because of the positioning of the property set far back, I think that is minimal. And I think we've got to be sensitive to that road view and the impact. So that weighs heavily with me in making the decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. For clarity, from my notes, the inspector said, or words to the effect, there are nearby listed buildings, but my notes say the previous inspector concluded on the much larger scheme that it would not harm and therefore preserve the setting of those assets. So it's the list of buildings he was talking about. But he also then went on to say the inspector found that the proposal would affect a limited part of the conservation area. As you can see on screen, it is literally only that corner of the conservation area. So it's a limited part of the conservation area with any impact on the conservation area relatively localised. The inspector then said, therefore, the proposal would cause less than substantial harm. I agree with that because it's the same, it's a smaller building, but it still causes less than substantial harm to the significance of the conservation area, and then you need to weigh up the impacts and the benefits from that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks,
Paul. Okay. Miles?
Thank you, Chair. Could we just go back to the image of the sort of satellite image overview of the site? Just on Councillor Holmes's point around the care home, Ivy House, just to the north of the, well, northwest, I guess, looking from my view of the gardens of this application, that green space to the left, I believe is a care facility. Has any consultation or communication taken place with that home at all? I'm just thinking on potential impacts for the residents potentially who might be vulnerable that are adjacent to where this application is.
Far away, Paul.
All those properties that adjoin the red edge of the application site, and I don't know, because will have been notified of the application and the site notice will have been put up. I don't know the extent of Ivy House's curtilage, whether it comes down across that green garden area. So they will, thank you, so they will have been notified of the application as an adjoining property, adjoining the application site.
Thank you. Any other comments? Matt?
Just on that, I think it wasn't that long ago, but it seemed like a long time ago. We were looking at an application in another ward where there was a care facility. It was an old B&B, wasn't it, I think? And then there was a care facility next door. I can't remember the ward we were talking about. And there was a lot of discussion about the impact on the care facility. The point is, that Councillor Patterson's raised, is that we just want to be sure that the proper consideration has been made on Ivy House, which is right next door on the curtilage of that red line. So yeah, that's I think that's just a valid challenge really, to make sure that it has been properly considered, because I know it has been previously. I mean, the facility might be very different. Not totally sure the type of care that Ivy House offers. I'd have to look at it. But yeah, it's a question to say, has that been properly considered?
Whilst James is checking, when standing in the back garden of the application site, looking towards Ivy House, there is, from memory, 6-foot wall, maybe higher, between properties, such that you can't actually see what's beyond it, the garden area, until you're looking on screen like this. But we will have notified that property during our publicity arrangements.
Yes, Matt.
And I've just looked it up, and this is the NHS information. Care service for people with dementia, caring for adults over 65, physical disabilities, and importantly, sensory impairments. And I think there may be some parallels here to the previous application that we considered. I know it's a different application, but I'm just making the point that some of those areas I think were very much material planning considerations for that application that we discussed, and I'm just worried that that has been missed in this application.
Through you, Chair, I'm not sure it's been missed, and the case you're referring to was HMO, thanks James, HMO and property, Cheek by Jowl, they were next door to each other, and this one is a significant distance away, and I've just been told to my right that we did notify them of the application, and had they have come back to us with any, you would have seen their response in the bullet points. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. Councillor Bolton.
Yeah, I really think Councillor Matt Holmes is clutching at straws here. We deal with each application as an individual case. Whilst there will be similarities, as there will be when we deal with so many applications, I don't think you can compare Thornhill Road with this application. And they're totally different aspects. One was a HIMO, this is a family home. I really think, you know, we've got to move the vote, and I move the recommendation as listed in the papers.
Just come back on that, Matt. Yeah.
No. This is what it's about: different opinions and listening to the different approaches, and I accept that. Can we talk about conditions, please? When would it be appropriate to talk about conditions if Councillor Bolton's putting forward?
Yeah, that's fine.
For approval, can I do that now, Chair, or would you like to have a vote first?
Conditions? You can come
Mr.
back to
Teasdale, which
conditions.
way would you prefer it?
It's all, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's always difficult that as Councillor Bolton's moved the recommendation, we usually should go to seconder, unless Councillor Bolton would like to hold that moving to consider. Then in that case we need to go to second. We can talk about conditions after the vote, depending on which way the vote goes.
Yep. It's been moved and seconded. So if we go to the vote, so all those in favour of the application, please.
6, Chair.
6 for. Any against? 2.
2.
That's carried.
Sorry, Chair, do you want to move to the question of conditions that Councillor Holmes has
Happy
asked?
to. Matt?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm sure some of these are covered, but I'll just list them anyway, so officers can sort of absorb them and have a chat about it. I think the materials, I think it needs submit and approve sample panel, brick and tile matching conservation area character before commencement. I think that's fair enough. I think that revised elevations reducing dormer width, gable prominence and window proportions to traditional ratios before substructure works can, proceed. I think that there should be a full hard and soft landscaping plan, including boundary treatments before occupation. I think that there should be a species enhancement scheme, back boxes, native planting, again, conservation area. And I think that there should be agreed viewpoints to confirm compliance with approved plans before external walling as well. Now, if some of those are covered already, absolutely fine, but I just wanted officers' advice on those potential conditions.
Through you, Chair. Can I go back to the last one, Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, so viewpoints to confirm compliance with approved plans before external walling. So in other words, ensure that it's right before walls go up.
Through you, Chair. I assume that means, well, what we've approved is the plans before us, all the plans when read as a package. So for the applicant's benefit, you've got approval, we're expecting it to be built like this with the approved plans. And if there is deviation, then there's a problem. You end up with a problem because you could end up back here, and because this was controversial, we could end up in a situation where enforcement action is taken for works that don't comply with the plans. So the plans, as with every application, the plans have got to match what's been approved. So that, I think that last point is covered implicitly by what we do. What I can't do is change the plans or the detail of the plan. We've just approved this scheme with the elevations as they are. So you can't really start changing those elevations by condition to here's a permission, but you can't look like that, it has to look like this. You can't do that. We've covered the materials, condition 3, and we've covered species enhancement scheme, condition 4, which could be extended to include landscaping scheme, which includes boundary treatment, but the boundaries are already there. You know, I mentioned the wall that's on one side. There's boundaries on the other side, and going down beyond the pine trees towards the hollow is a significant distance away. You have to have a good reason to have a condition in the first place. So what we might decide to do, members, is have the species enhancement scheme at condition 4 extended to include a general landscaping scheme. Sorry.
I'm happy with that.
Just one point there, Chair, if I may. Just going back to the brickwork, because it's a conservation area, how are officers, is it retrospective to ensure that the brick type and the bond and the pointing, etc., is all in keeping and as agreed? Is there no remit to ensure that that's actually totally correct before the building is actually built or erected? I say this because of the impact on a conservation area.
In the good old days when I dealt with planning applications, I would go out on site and see a sample panel being built with the bricks that you're going to use, with the bonding you're going to use. So I suggest, if members agree, condition 3, it has words to the effect of before development commences, agreement of external materials shall be agreed with local planning authority, which includes sample panel on site, or words to that effect.
Chair, just to finalise this, what I would suggest is just to get a committee to confirm that those 2 amendments to the species and the materials are acceptable, and then we can move on.
Can we have your acceptance, please? All those in favour of the condition increases in wording? Thank you. Yeah, that's carried, everybody. That application is granted. Thank you very much.
Chair, yeah, I think just to re-echo sort of the point that Councillor Bolton made, I think it's normal to address conditions before sort of, but it's a question of timing, obviously, in terms of movement.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, speakers. Alison, could you let Lucy know that she's allowed back in, if that's okay?
No.
We'll move on to item 6.2, which is 1 Glebe Moss Lane, Oakwood, and Jenny, yours.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for a change of use from a dwelling house, a use class C3, to a care home, use class C2, at number 1 Glebe Moss Lane, Derby. The proposed care home would provide residential accommodation and support for 2 children or young people requiring care within the existing property. The existing residential dwelling is a 3-bedroom bungalow located in a fairly prominent position on the corner of Glebe Moss Lane and Danebridge Crescent. Surrounding neighbouring properties consist of varying sizes and designs positioned in a fairly uniform pattern. According to the submitted details, J24 Resourcing Limited offers support services to both adults and children with autism, mental health needs, learning disabilities and difficulties, as well as to young people with emotional and behavioural disorders, and each individual receives a person-centred support plan to ensure the appropriate level of care is consistently delivered. Care within the home would be provided by a team of up to 6 staff members, with a maximum of 2 carers present at any one time. The team would operate on a shift basis to ensure 24-hour care. Shift changes would take place twice daily at approximately 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. The children or young people living in the home would typically receive 1 professional visit per day, such as from a social worker or a tutor, and all visitors would be required to make appointments in advance, with visiting hours restricted to between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. The application details indicate that there are 3 parking spaces available within the site at present, which includes an existing integral garage and parking for 2 vehicles upon the driveway. This parking arrangement will remain unaltered. The site is considered to be in a reasonably accessible location, and staff are encouraged to travel to work by walking, cycling, or using public transport. The The proposed change of use to a care home remains residential in scale and impact, with up to 2 residents and support staff on site at any one time, with no significant adverse impacts on neighbouring residents, amenity, highway safety, or on the character and appearance of the surrounding area, which is subject to compliance with the recommended conditions. Although third-party objections have been received, I'm satisfied that the relevant planning matters have been adequately addressed within the officer's report, and the application aligns with the local and national planning policy objectives, including making effective use of the existing housing stock and supporting diverse residential needs. For these reasons, it's therefore recommended that the application should be approved. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. We have one speaker on this. Ms Redmond, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to voice mine and my parents' concerns over number 1 development into care facility for these emotionally distressed children that we've had. My parents live at number 3, and the worry and stress of what they've witnessed has had a negative impact on their health and well-being. Previously, they lived in a quiet residential area of bungalows and small family homes. Number 1 and number 3 are in an open plan setting with no walls or fences at the front and sides. My parents' bungalow wall forms part of the boundary. My parents can no longer open their side windows as they open directly onto number 1's driveway, back door and bathroom. Missiles have been thrown out of the bathroom window and bricks thrown onto my parents' property. Disturbed, distressed youngsters arrive, never stay long, and are often removed by ambulance, police, and on more than one occasion in handcuffs. They obviously need a specialised placement in a secure, consistent setting with specialised staff, and we do not believe this is at number 1. Due to the open plan and close proximity, my parents are in the midst of the comings and goings of number 1. Mum and Dad can't be immune to the activities and incidents that occur at number 1 due to the positioning of both houses. For example, we recently had a young girl who arrived in her nightwear after hours of shouting, screaming, banging, throwing missiles out the window and repeated profanities including, excuse me, F off, don't touch me, get away from me. Police arrived in 2 cars. Police arriving is a common occurrence. Eventually, the police insisted the girl was removed as they felt the placement was totally unsuitable. The girl left still in her nightwear. My parents had tried and failed to sit in their garden. It's too distressing hearing the girl's distress. This is not uncommon. Shouting and screaming is heard even in the middle of the night. We are all left worried, what on earth is going on, and are these youngsters safe? My mum has spoken to attending police officers and they could not guarantee my parents' safety. They said it depends on who's in the house. Police have told mum to complain, as police have told my parents they are not happy with number 1 suitability. My parents are frankly too ill. The main issue includes impact on my parents due to the close open plan nature of number 1, the level of specialised care these youngsters obviously require, and parking issues. I've worked in community care and we set up the houses to meet the needs of the individuals, to be part of the community and not negatively impact either those in care or those living next door. So I ask you carefully to consider carefully the impact on my parents and those young people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Redmond. Jenny, do you want to come back on any of those points, please?
I think a lot of the points raised were about the antisocial behaviour, which obviously is more of a police matter than something that we can deal with as a planning department, to be honest.
You can come in, Paul, yes. Jenny.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'm sorry your parents are feeling that distress. I've written down Cortland Gardens and the issues you as a committee refused planning permission at Cortland Gardens, went to appeal, the inspector looked at it very carefully and allowed the appeal because, I'm paraphrasing now, planning is concerned with the land use and we have very limited control over the management and operation of that land use. So it's back to, is a residential use, this is what it is a residential use appropriate in a residential area? Yes, as long as it's managed properly. We can put a condition on, we've done it several times, about having a management regime, but we don't really enforce that. That's other legislation that deals with that. And we can put a temporary permission on if we wish to see how it works, but then you're back here in 12 months' time to see how did it work and is that land use appropriate or not. It's back to the land use, not necessarily how it's operating. But I do feel, and I'd be saying exactly the same thing if I was representing my parents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Committee, Councillor Bolton.
So firstly, for clarification, listening very carefully to what we've just been outlined by the Speaker, it's already being used. So it's a retrospective. I couldn't see that in the report. Anyway, yes, as I said earlier, we deal with each application in individual case, but we can, as committee, recall previous applications for such houses to be in our communities all over the city to resource the housing of our, as corporate parents, we have a duty to do that. And a lot of what Jenny said is down to the management plan, not necessarily a planning consideration. So I think, bearing in mind what we have done previously, we put a temporary permission on this and bring it back in 12 months. Clearly, any upset in the community, as we know from Cortland Gardens, as Mr Clark's just outlined, we've had previous experience of these situations, and it's regrettable for the nearby community and the neighbours, and particularly listening carefully to what the Speaker said. But it comes down to the management plan, as we've said earlier. Clearly, Ofsted have to ensure, it's fully certified and under strict regulation. But there are some instances where we can't say as a planning committee we can deal with because we can't. But I think in this instance, we go along with the permission, but on a temporary 12 months situation, as previously.
Thanks, sir. Councillor Kerr.
I think this is a really difficult situation, and I thank the Speaker for sharing it, because I'd looked at this, the street view pictures and so on, and it hadn't struck me that the open plan situation could be such an issue. But I can now imagine, a child playing outside and using that end wall of the property for bouncing a ball against, for example, and that being really annoying and quite difficult to stop. So I can appreciate the issue that we have here and the fact that it is an open plan site. And we have approved other sites which are open plan, very similar to this. But I don't know absolutely where the boundary is here, but I can feel that we could put a condition in to say that we expect a boundary treatment. But I'm not sure that that's appropriate, because we would then be changing the nature of the area. And so I'd like some advice on that as to whether we could suggest a boundary treatment that might help. It's quite narrow. It would leave quite a narrow space between number 3 and the edge of the drive. And that might actually make it not practical to have the same amount of parking as we currently are providing, depending on the width of people's cars. So have we got information that could address either of those points, and some sort of planning opinion on whether it would be appropriate to require a fence to be put along the side of the property?
Through you, Chair, the red edge on plan on screen is the boundary of the application site. You could require boundary details, but I wouldn't necessarily want that coming further forward than the front of the property, because it looks like it's open plan there. you'd be requiring a fence alongside the gable end of the adjoining property only. That said, draft condition 3 requires, before the use is commenced, a detailed management strategy. We've heard that doesn't apply now. That needs to be changed. If you were to approve this, that within a month, 3 weeks of granting approval, we shall have a management strategy so we know what those details are that are required by the strategy, including contact details for members of the staff. It starts to bring it into line. At the moment, it's operating without planning permission. And you would hope that reasonable people would start to operate in a more sensitive manner and manage the property, particularly as I think Cortland Gardens wasn't registered. It was almost, everything was retrospect. And I'm not saying this is, but it might be the case. But you would want to ensure that you have those details, at least for the contact details for members of staff, so that you can, if something happens, you've got somebody who you can talk to. It's verging on being outside the planning process, but it's something that's been accepted and we work with to try and get these land uses working correctly. With regards, that's really helpful, James. With regards to the boundary treatment, you can see the driveway on the slide and the tarmac driveway. I suspect there's a pin curb going down at the edge of the driveway. That's where the line of the fence would go. So the gravel would be the other side of the fence. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, to take Councillor Pross's comment, you wouldn't want necessarily to block those windows because of a fence. But as the objector raises, that boundary is the boundary between the two properties. Whether we put a boundary fence there or not, are you going to solve the problem, the alleged problem?
Thanks, Paul. We've got Councillor Bonser, Councillor Rawson, then.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we've been here before and listened very carefully to what you've said, and you know, have sympathy for your parents and what they're experiencing. And I think this is a very tricky one in terms of that boundary and that open aspect. But I think if we are minded to support this, I would agree with Councillor Bolton that we put a condition in for it to be temporary and to have, I can see the conditions include a management plan. But I'd just like to say as well that I object personally to these applications that come, it's already in use. And the applicants don't help themselves, in my opinion, Chair, because whereas we're talking about speculative behaviour in previous applications where we've put conditions in, it's known behaviour like Cortland Gardens. You know, it is known experience. So that worries me. And in terms of the fence boundary, I think that's something that obviously the adjoining property would be very sensitive to. So I think that would have to be sort of in agreement with them. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a 6-foot fence, does it? But it, you know, if it's some sort of physical boundary that keeps so that the young people know where the end of their property is, their home is, and the start of somebody else's. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, where these applications come before us, where the change of use has already occurred, as seems to be the case here, then I do think that does bring amenity into the equation as a material condition for us to consider as a planning committee. And we've heard from the speaker this evening of the impact that that's had. It is similar, as people have said, to Cortland Gardens in some ways. And the inspector's decision on Cortland Gardens was marginal, actually, and finely balanced. I think we'd all agree, although coming down on one particular side. So I do think it is reasonable to it is a reasonable case to make that amenity is a legitimate consideration for planning purposes here. I don't have a particular problem in terms of increased traffic or on-street parking pressure. There's 2 spaces and 2 members of staff on site, so I think that's covered and can be managed. But from the amenity point of view, it does leave me minded to refuse to be honest on the basis of amenity. Because, as other members of the committee said, we do have evidence before us. There's a plan in place, obviously, and that's not working as things stand. So, difficult one, tricky, finely balanced, but I do think we have some evidence to weigh up in terms of amenity in this case, and I think that it is legitimate to consider that.
Thanks, Martin. Matt?
Thank you. My question is, we talk about the management plan, the management strategy, sorry, and in the conditions, should this be agreed, it says, obviously, the management strategy shall be adhered to at all times during the life of the development and reviewed annually. That's a positive thing, obviously. However, I think I've sort of raised this before in similar applications. How does what is in the strategy, where is the check and balance? Who does that in terms of who checks that it's being adhered to? And I know there's going to be a yearly review, but again, who does that? And how is it actually considered to ensure that it's actually being run in a correct manner? Is it just literally the local residents that will make complaints and that will trigger officers into looking into it to see whether there's any breaches of the strategy, etc.? I'm just very concerned that we agree these things, but there isn't actually a mechanism to actually do a check and balance. I'm not talking about every week or every day, but yeah, some insight into that, please.
Through you, Chair. Yes is the answer. It is, we can get a management strategy from the developer, from the operator, and with that in place, public document, with the contact details of members of the staff. The check and balance is members of the public. If they have issues, if they suffer issues, then first port of call are those issues breaching the strategy that the developer has submitted to us? Yes or no? It's kind of a shot across their bows. We've got your contact details. People are watching you. You've said you're going to run it like this, so go ahead and run it like this. Because if you do it right, there shouldn't be a problem. But if there are problems, first port of call, I would suggest, is the concerned residents would contact the staff members from those contact details on that management strategy. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. Councillor Prosser first.
Thanks. Same operator, same problems, no planning, it's all been done, retrospective, really frustrating. We have to, as a council, clamp down when these problems exist. The children are probably funded by this council. We have to sort our own children management schemes. This council has got to get a grip on this problem. I know it's not a planning issue. We probably can't do anything about it because we lost the last appeal. But it's frustrating. We have to solve this problem. And And we're not going to do it in this chamber. We have to do it from the top and through our child services and through our environmental enforcement teams, whatever it is. But we have to solve this problem for our residents because it's not good enough.
You can.
Sorry, Jenny, I'm taking your limelight. On that very point, retrospective applications annoy me intensely because why do you think you're going to get away with it? You're going to need an application and you only set yourselves up for a fall if you can't run it properly. So I say properly, you can't run it without detriment to the residents. And it's potentially costly because if you're building something, you build something that needs planning permission, you build it, you've spent all your money, you might have to unpick what you've done. They may have to, if this gets refused tonight and then they go to appeal, they will go to appeal because they're already running it, they've spent their money. If they lose their appeal, they're going to have to undo everything that they've put in investing in the property, changing it for whatever purpose. So it annoys me intensely that people do retrospective, but it's not illegal. You can do it and take those chances, but I would not encourage it. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. Lucy?
Thank you again. We have a care home, okay, it's for adults who have challenging behaviours within Littleover, and it was one of the first to have a management plan. It's been really nice and quiet and haven't been any problems for about 2 years. It has now had problems again. But they do have a mechanism by which the residents and the management company can come together and review what is going on alongside people from the relevant parts of social services. And I'm hoping that we will solve this new problem in the same way as we've solved previous problems by talking around it. It isn't easy, but it is the way that communities should be solving their problems, by exploring, understanding and going forward together. In this case, I do think that it could help significantly to have a clear boundary between the driveway of this property and the next property. I don't want to design it here, but if we could have a condition that says that officers will agree between the applicant and the adjacent property what boundary whether a boundary and what sort of boundary would assist, I think that would be helpful. We're not insisting on it from here, but I think that negotiation could be of use. And I'm thinking it might be a 1 foot high wall, or it might be a 1 metre high fence, and it might be on the drive or just adjacent to the drive. The ownership could also be transferred over or whatever, because there is a garden wall to the rear which appears to be in the ownership of number 3, I'm not sure. But I think we facilitate that. And I think a temporary permission, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect a fence to go up for a 1 year temporary permission. I don't think that's too high a burden of cost. And I would certainly support having a temporary permission and setting up a really strong management plan. Thank you.
Thank you. John?
Sorry, Chair, might I just add cycle parking? There's reference from the highways thing about cycle parking being required. There's actually a garage. The garage will make a decent cycle for people who are going to be there for any length of time. But for somebody who's only coming for a brief period of time, it might be a tutor or it might be a friend, then to have some secure, simple cycle parking at the front, I think should be included. There isn't a condition about that at the moment.
I thought we'd got away with it. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. It's apparent from the speaker tonight that management plan or not, it's not working. And it's nearly like you feel like you've got to drag this company, business, whoever they are, to the table to force them to do a management plan. If they really were dedicated to this, they would have had something in place already. And the speaker wouldn't have had to mention all these problems, including swearing and so on. They're bungalows that have been built in that area. I know there's houses over the road. It's a residential area, and we have this problem over and over and over again, where we're changing the use of these buildings. And these people who've bought these properties, they didn't buy them. They bought them to be quiet and residential. They didn't buy them to be next to these homes. I know we've got to find solutions, and Tim spoke about that. but this isn't it. So how can we have any trust in a company or business, whoever, that want to ride roughshod over planning and just retrospectively go for planning? In my opinion, anybody who does that, we should only grant plan permission in exceptional circumstances, not by and by. I'm absolutely against this. I find it abhorrent, and I think it's negligent of us if we vote for this. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Matt, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just a couple of points. I mean, officers are absolutely right, and we all know that whether you agree or otherwise about the use of residential properties for this purpose, if they are well run, and those nearby should not even know that it isn't a family home. That is what, and that is the case in across the city. There are really well run facilities that do not cause any impact on those living in those residential areas, and that's the way it should be. But we also know, we've spoken about this many times, especially when we have retrospective evidence, that they do sometimes cause issues. Back to the Councillor Patterson in Mickleover Ward, where there was a retrospective and there was really significant issues, and the impact was severe for those living nearby. But that's by the by. I just want to try and explore, and whether Councillor Rawson is willing to sort of expand on it, but I think he was talking about amenity impact, which would be GD5. And Councillor Kerr mentioned about the fence. I'm not quite sure how viable that is, but was that an attempt to actually resolve the issues that Councillor Rawson was raising about amenity, and that would somehow potentially solve it? So just a little bit of clarity either from officers on that, or even invite Councillor Rawson to if he would, just to slightly expand on it, so I have a better understanding on what his point was.
Martin, okay.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think that is the policy that we're talking about, GD5, take advice from officers in terms of the amenity of the neighbourhood and the impact that the request to change the planning use is relating to. So I think we're looking at the impact of that change of use, which has occurred. As we said, it's retrospective, so we are able to make a judgment on the impact. It's not hearsay. It's not what might happen. It's what actually has happened. Yes, GD5 amenity safe policy GD5 of the City of Derby local plan seeks to prevent unacceptable harm to the amenity of nearby areas arising from issues such as this. So that's the point I was wanting to raise, Chair. If officers may wish to expand on that, if so, that would be helpful.
Thanks, Martin. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. I think amenity is covered in 7.3 of your report. On pages 22 and 23. You're right, GD5 is the main thrust that you would use. At the foot it talks about possibly E24 and H13 as well, more general amenity ones. What we're trying to do is ensure that the use doesn't cause unacceptable impact on residential amenity, use of the land, use of the property. If you were so minded to refuse the application, GD5 would be one of the main thrusts of your reasons for refusal. Yes, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. Lucy?
I'm just going to respond back on the comment about the boundary. I think this is something that could help the management and make it clearer where is acceptable for you as a resident, a young resident of that property to be and somewhere where you shouldn't be. You know, you shouldn't be picking up the gravel and throwing it around because that is not part of your property. But at the moment, it doesn't intuitively say that is not part of your property. So, but I don't want to determine that. I'd like that to be a discussion and an agreement between the council overseeing it and the two property owners. But I just think it could help. There was other point I wanted to make was, about the management scheme, and the management scheme needs to include not just how it's going to be reviewed, but quite a lot more detail about the process and the status of it, which I don't think is there at the moment. So I think that's covered in the existing condition about boosting the management scheme, bolstering it up.
Yes, and Mr. Teasdale might want to jump in as well. I'm always nervous about a management scheme per se, because we're treading on other people's legislative toes. We push the boundaries to try and get something within our envelope that we can, you know, the reasonableness of the condition is we've got a mechanism for us and the residents to contact the owner. You don't have that with most planning applications. And we've got that annually reviewed. And going back to the Cortland Gardens scheme, I think this is the same condition that we managed to get the inspector to agree to. So I think if we start broadening our scope with the management condition, we might end up tripping ourselves up and going beyond our planning remit. And I know we're sailing close to the wind at the moment. But with the inspector agreed this style of condition on Cortland Gardens, and I would be happy to stay with what we have. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. Any further? Or you can.
Can I just ask why J24 Resourcing Limited aren't here this evening to speak to this application? Were they offered? Because clearly we've had a speaker against it, so have they declined the offer, or did they? No, I mean to speak. They didn't register to speak. Okay.
Just before we go to any vote, there's a bit of a conundrum with the boundary treatment and a temporary permission. And Councillor Kerr alluded to that. If we grant a temporary permission, it's unreasonable to require them to do the boundary treatment and go to the expense if we then turn around 12 months later and say, actually, you haven't got permission and you want to take it away. But you could implement both. Say, you know, I understand the reasons for a clear boundary definition between the two properties, and that might solve a lot of the problems. And a temporary 12-month permission addresses a lot of the concerns because you need to run it in accordance with your management plan, which Councillor Evans, just for clarity again, the management plan isn't in place at the moment. They haven't got one. They're operating with no management plan that we have control over at all. If permission is granted, we gain that control with a management plan so that we have at least contact details of the operator for us and any affected neighbours to make direct contact. We don't have that at the moment.
My point was a bona fide company.
And I agree with the retrospective nature, yes. But we're here to determine the application we have. We know what we know, and we've recommended approval with conditions, which might need tweaking slightly if you go down that route. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Lee.
I don't think that the cost of putting in a simple boundary treatment is very much compared to what it's costing for an authority to send children in that location. And if the applicant balks at the cost, they can always go to appeal as being an unreasonable condition.
I agree with that. I really do agree with that. Can we... oh, sorry, Jenny.
Yeah.
One small thing is the management plan condition. We've been putting that in place on a lot of applications over the last, I would say, probably 18 months. And I've received quite a number now of the management plans from various different companies, so not J24 and other companies. And I'd be happy to share that those management plans with anybody who wants to see them. Some of them are very good, outline a lot of details of what could really help with running these facilities. I think it would help other companies to see those, so I'm happy to share those.
Can we have a training session on that?
That would be really good, that one. Yeah. Jenny could present that one. So, yeah. No, good idea. Good idea. Shall we just, if we can...
Sorry, just one point sort of on the fencing. An alternative would be, obviously, if you're granting it for a 12-month period, you'll be reviewing it in 12 months' time, and if you felt a fence was appropriate at that time, you could impose it then. But if you, alternatively, as you suggest, it might not be that expensive to put a fence up and now. Depends what is agreed, it can be agreed.
I tend to agree with what Lucy's saying. I think that might calm down some of the things we've got in.
In my view, putting a clear boundary there will make it easier to achieve the behaviours that we were expecting. And therefore, it would be an asset to the applicant and not a significant burden.
So if you go for the conditions, we've got a stringent management plan.
We've got the management plan. We've got clear boundary treatment to be agreed.
Yep.
We've got potentially a temporary 12 months. Yep. And condition 3 on the management plan needs a time limit in it. The inspector at Cortland Garden says, within 2 months, you shall give us the management plan. Yep. And I think we do the same here because it's in operation. Yep. It was seen reasonable then, it's reasonable now.
Definitely.
And secure cycle parking.
Yes.
Thank you.
Five, Chair.
Any against? Sorry. Permission is granted with those conditions with the management plan within 2 months. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for that.
Of the decision.
Of the decision, that is. Of the decision, which is, yes. That is carried. Thank you, Ms Redmond. All the best to your parents as well from the committee. Thank you very much. We now move on, everybody, to the last item, item 6.3, which is Derbyshire Constabulary, Cotton Lane. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to the former police station site on Cotton Lane. As members of the committee will be aware, the site is vacant and is on a brownfield site that falls within the bounds of the Osmaston regeneration area identified in our local plan policy AC14. That policy seeks the housing-led transformation of the defined regeneration area, and this proposal is for a scheme comprising 102 apartments, and it accords with those policy aspirations for Osmaston. As is outlined in the report, 55 one-bedroom and 47 two-bedroom apartments are proposed in 2 L-shaped blocks of accommodation. The scale of the 2 blocks is a stepped arrangement ranging between 3 and 6 stories in height. In the application submission, the applicant is keen to promote the delivery of a low-carbon development on the site, and PV panels, green roofs and air source heat pumps are included in the design. The proposals also involve the retention and reuse of parts of the existing 4-storey former police station building that still occupies the southern corner of the site. The application has been the subject of a series of revisions, and we have worked to address a number of matters relating to the layout, massing, scale and external appearance of the development, along with issues relating to access, permeability and on-site parking. We have had the benefit of advice and input from our urban design officer, whose comments are included in your report. He has commented that the revised design now presented can be supported on urban and architectural grounds. The revised scheme provides active frontage to Cotton Lane, with the highest parts of the development at the southern end, adjacent to the road junction. The development is set back from the culvert easement and allows for the successful retention of existing mature trees along the site frontage. This provides separation from the existing houses opposite in Cotton Lane. The stepping down of the scale of the development towards Amari Park is supported given the low-level scale of this immediate neighbour. Detailed consideration of the relationship between the development and Amari Park has been undertaken, with revisions secured to address issues relative to overlooking and massing. While the development extends close to the boundary that the site shares with Amari Park, the distances from the boundary, the orientation of the buildings and the treatment of the flank side elevations of the apartment buildings have been carefully considered. It is concluded that the revised scheme now presented is generally acceptable in design and amenity terms. You will note that this is subject to the imposition of a number of planning conditions which seek to control external materials, architectural detailing, along with the management and maintenance of the veranda and landscape spaces. During the life of this application, we have sought to secure an increase in the level of off-street parking provision to serve the development, and the scheme now presented provides for 50% off-street provision, which amounts to 51 spaces to serve the 102 apartments. Members of the committee will note that as a late item, a joint response from Transport Planning, Highways Development Control and Travel Planning has been provided following the receipt of a revised ground floor plan that provides changes to the siting and number of visitor cycle parking spaces. This revised ground floor plan has also been circulated as a late item, along with details of a car club scheme that has been submitted by the applicant. The joint response from our highways colleagues confirms that nothing has substantially changed from the advice presented in your report, insofar as the proposal will be no worse than the extant police station land use would be in terms of traffic generation. This is a highly sustainable location, and based on the 50% on-site parking provision, Highways colleagues advise that they could not demonstrate that overall the revised development will have a severe impact in terms of the safe and satisfactory operation of the highway network. Paragraph 116 of the NPPF directs that in these circumstances, planning permission should not be refused for a development on highway grounds. The main point that I would direct members to note from the joint response that has been circulated as a late item is Highways colleagues' recommendation for the imposition of 2 additional conditions to those already listed in the report. They are a preoccupation condition to allow for visitor cycle parking details to be finalised in terms of the number, location and design, so that options to maximise the number of spaces can be explored, that includes for cycle parking shelters that are of a covered design, and the submission of an updated travel plan which includes for a 5-year period of monitoring and its implementation in accordance with a timetable to be agreed as part of the plan. It is noted that the Travel Plan Officer is pleased to see the inclusion of a number of travel planning measures being proposed, including proposals for the introduction of a car club. Other technical matters outlined in the report have been suitably assessed, including the flood risk to the site, and are deemed to be acceptable subject to the recommended conditions listed. Members will note that the viability of the scheme has been subject to independent scrutiny through the district valuer. The district valuer has advised that the scheme is unviable and cannot afford to pay the financial contributions outlined in section 7.9 of your report. The heads of terms of a section 106 agreement has been agreed with the applicants to put the financial contributions into overage, which aims to capture any uplift in profit, and a defined review mechanism for that process has been agreed with the applicant. The heads of terms do, however, secure the applicant's agreement to pay the council's fee towards the amendment of the traffic regulation order at the start of the development, which is necessary to enable the additional on-street parking bays to be delivered. I would highlight the conclusions drawn in your report. They are that the regeneration of this brownfield site is supported. It meets with the aims of policy AC14 in its delivery of high-quality mixed-tenure homes. A low-carbon development is promoted and a high-quality living environment can be achieved for future occupiers. Biodiversity gains are to be achieved and the retention of mature trees across the site's frontage are welcomed. The design and implications of the revised scheme for the amenity of neighbouring residential properties are deemed to be acceptable. Notably, the provision of 102 apartments in this urban and sustainable part of the city should be afforded significant weight in decision-making, given the city's current housing supply position. The recommendation is made for planning permission to be granted subject to the completion of the Section 106 agreement, the conditions outlined in the report, along with the 2 additional conditions arising from the Joint Highways response. And Chair, I understand we have some speakers.
Thanks, Sarah. Yes, we'll first have Mr. Cropper. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Good evening, Chair and Councillors. My name's Tim Cropper. I'm the agent for the application. The site comprises a vacant former police station, which is positioned in a sustainable location within the urban area and which benefits from access to a range of connecting bus and rail links. Due to the lengthy period of vacancy, the site is regularly subject to antisocial behaviour. The building is visually imposing and significantly taller than neighbouring houses within the immediate local area. As such, the site offers an opportunity for redevelopment. The scheme will bring forward a range of residential accommodation in the form of 102 apartments that will make a significant and positive contribution towards the city's housing requirements, whilst providing living opportunities for members of the local community. This is particularly important in light of the Council's inability to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. The site also forms part of the Osmaston regeneration area, which is of strategic importance to the City of Derby. Accordingly, the proposed redevelopment of the site represents an excellent opportunity to contribute to its ongoing regeneration. The application submission proposes a carefully considered design solution, which has been informed by the constraints of the site and by positive engagement with the Council prior to and post-submission over the past 2 years. In particular, the number of residential blocks within the layout has been reduced from 4 to 2. The 2 L-shaped blocks will provide active frontages onto Cotton Lane, whilst the layout will allow for generous separation distances and extensive areas of soft landscaping and trees to be incorporated throughout. Additional revisions to the roof form and external materials help to further break up the massing and to provide a visually interesting, contemporary form of development that will be constructed in a truly sustainable manner and enhance the visual character of the local area. Sizable separation distances will also be retained to all neighbouring houses, including those on Cotton Lane. This sense of separation will be reinforced by the retention of mature trees and by Cotton Lane itself, resulting in no harmful impacts to neighbour amenity. The proposed level of parking provision is consistent with the planning inspector's assessment of recent comparable developments, and the Council's Highways Officer has confirmed no unacceptable impacts upon highway safety or the road network. Therefore, in line with your officer's recommendation, I respectfully urge members to grant permission for the application. Thank you for listening. The project architect, Hugh Dennis, or I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, sir. We now have Mr. Mitter. You have 3 minutes, sir. If you want to press your button.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Martin Mitter, and I lived on Cotton Lane for 20 years. I'm speaking on behalf of the residents of Cotton Lane, where over 90% of whom have signed a petition against the planning application for the former police station site. The residents are, of course, aware of the ongoing issues regarding the condition and safety of the former police station. However, these matters fall primarily under the responsibility of the police and security services until such time as the site is redeveloped in the suitable housing for our community. We are not against development, but the current proposal for 100+ flats is simply the wrong fit for our community. On Cotton Lane, where the street is fully parked, there's about 40 cars most of the time. There are no spaces available. This development would add at least 30 more cars. Where are they supposed to go? Parking is already at the breaking point, and this will make the situation unmanageable. The flats would bring around 150 new residents, more than the street's current population, which is about 100 at the moment, creating heavy strain on transport, etc. 5-story buildings would block light, overlook homes, and change the character of our neighborhood. We also ask, why is this site being treated differently? Just one street above Cotton Lane, a similar site was developed with terraced houses. That approach worked well, blending with the local area, easing parking demand and providing family homes. If it was good enough there, why can't it be good enough here? We believe there is a better way forward. Build houses instead of multi-store flats, reduce density and parking pressures, deliver growth that is sustainable and consistent with nearby developments. This is not about rejection development, it's about making sure change is fair, consistent and respectful of existing communities. We urge the Council to reconsider the current proposal and work with us to create a balanced and thoughtful development for Cotton Lane. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Committee, would you like to make any comments, please? Matt? Yeah.
Just to clarify, because obviously we've had some late paperwork reports and changes. Can I just clarify the actual number of parking spaces? Because in the amended document, it mentions a figure and then it goes on to say, and there's these on top, I think. So just clarify, I suppose, as it stands, including what's been sent very late, what's the cycle provision, what's the on-site spaces for cars, please?
Yes, sure. The latest revised plan doesn't actually change the number of on-site car parking spaces. 102 apartments are proposed and 51 on-site spaces are proposed, so that's 50% provision. In addition to that, if you can see at the bottom of the plan that's on the screen now, there is a proposal to add in 5 parallel parking bays within the public highway. So the Section 106 payment for the traffic regulation order that the applicants have agreed to pay is to allow the traffic regulation order to be amended so that those off-street bays can be provided to help mitigate the impact of the development. Okay.
Yeah, come on again, Mike.
Follow up. So on at the risk of upsetting Councillor Kerr, we've got a lot of cycle provision there. And obviously the design of that, and I think it's mentioned in the report that I don't think they use the word excessive, but it is a lot. And it takes up that row there. So I assume that there was no design that could have increased the on-site parking provision and slightly, Councillor Kerr, reduced or redesigned the cycle provision so that there's that balance, because obviously there's lots of different ways that you can actually have cycle parking that is, stacked on top of each other and all those kind of different things. I'm just wondering, was it explored to see whether that could have been redesigned in some way and provide provide another 5 or 6 or so extra on-site spaces.
Thank you, Chair. I think the only answer I can provide to that is that this application has been before us for nearly 2 years, and we have gone through various revisions. As the agent has pointed out, we've gone from 4 buildings to 2. At some point, cycle parking provision was on the ground floor of the building. So it's been a combination of looking at different revisions in terms of the siting orientation, looking at the constraints of the site. And all I conclude for you tonight is that it's 51 spaces that is part of the proposal.
Thanks, Sarah. Go-Fres, do you want to come in on?
Sorry, Chair, mine was the same as Matt's. I think the car parking, and I think it's too less. You know, the parking is too less. That for that area, there should be more parking. It's already a lot for cars on the roads there, and we should look into more car parks on site, not on the roads. And I think we need more parking. 50% is not good enough. I think we should go more parking. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Lucy, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. We have to remember that as a site that is not in our ownership, we have to consider what is presented to us and say whether it is good enough for that location and for Derby. I like the thinking behind this site and the way it's been developed. I like the using the existing building and utilising the embedded carbon with all already in there. So the philosophy of that and the solar panels on the roof and the green roofs make me quite excited. And I was also pleased that they have now said that a car club is something else that would be something that they would support and include. We'd need a condition that actually says we expect that to happen. My personal view is that 1 car is not enough. And I think we should be seeking to have 2 or possibly 3 cars there initially, which would also be an asset for the local community. And it needs to be clear that that is an asset to the local community, as it says in the paperwork. And if there is sufficient use of the cars, then it gives us an opportunity to expand that. And hopefully that would mean there would be a reduced demand both on the street and the local community and also on site. I also like the way that there is the parkland area with the cycle parking and the acceptability of that. I would love that to be available for the public, but at least we've got frontage green area that is available for the wider community. I do not like the positioning of the cycle parking on that rear wall. I don't think that is helpful, and I don't know whether our condition about cycle parking can explore whether there are alternative layouts. You know, to put that closer to an entrance door is better. I don't like 2-level cycle parking either, because you have to be quite strong to be able to use the upper levels. I think it's quite important, and particularly at the moment, to have opportunity for cycle charging. I don't know whether there's going to be cycle charging provided along that back wall. It doesn't seem to me to be a very good location for it for that reason as well. I'm pleased about the condition for passing incidental cycle parking, secure cycle parking at the front. There is also quite a lot of comment from the highways officer about achieving the parking bays on the street. I've recently been to Newcastle upon Tyne, and they have quite a lot of parking which is on footway, but it's actually at footway level. So you don't need to dig down. It'll obviously need to have the right reinforcement like a driveway into a property, but it doesn't need to have the extra 3 inches or whatever it is of coverage. And if we can't achieve, if the services, underground services, are such that it's going to be very expensive and impractical to achieve that, then I think we need to look at an alternative that would be going up a gentle curb and parking on a demarked area, and I hope that that's something that a highways officer would find acceptable in Derby as it is in other places. So thank you for this. Thank you for all the work that's gone into the iterations and for bringing it to us.
Thanks, Lucy. Martin?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I like this scheme as well. It's a positive contribution to the housing need that we have in the city. The issue which is of some concern is parking and how that's going to be managed. I guess these sorts of schemes that we've looked at before that are predominantly apartments, we often have granted permission on the basis that they're car free and that there's no dedicated parking spaces. So I think potentially it could work. It is slightly out of the city centre, but with 50% spaces for every other apartment, in other words, that's potentially achievable given its sustainable location, its good transport links, etc. I think the size and the massing, given what was there before, it was quite a sizable building, so I think that's appropriate. I do like the green features that have been designed into it, so that's positive to see these applications coming forward that have really taken on board the green and environmental agenda, making them sustainable for the future. Just a quick question in terms of as residents only parking, has that been explored at all for as potentially a condition and payment through Section 106 or other agreement to look at restricting the parking spaces on that street for existing residents? Not sure whether we can do that, but don't know if it's been looked at.
Shaking your head.
Don't ask me.
That's okay. As Sarah has alluded to, we've been commenting on this scheme for the best part of 2 years, and it was subject to pre-app beforehand, and we have worked with them to get to a level of parking on site which we have had tested at appeal, and the inspector has said that in a similar location that 50% is good enough. This is a sustainable location. There are regular bus services on the Osmaston Road, and these are apartments. These are apartments which are 1 and 2 bedrooms, and you could legitimately live there. You don't need a car. There are many, many facilities and amenities within easy walking and cycling distance. So we are content that the level of on-site parking is sufficient for the new residents. I note that a couple of the councillors have commented regarding the cycle parking provision, which is high on this scheme, but has been marketed as a green scheme. And we don't have a cycle parking, residential parking standard included in our core strategy, but this would be a scheme where you are advocating its sustainable credentials and achieving the fact that they, I believe, 1 space per apartment, which is really good. So in terms of the location of the cycle parking, from our perspective, in terms of using it and where it's secure, I want to see secure parking which is covered in shelters so people don't come out and sit on a bike and think, I'm absolutely soaking wet. If it is moving and somewhere else on the site, maybe that could be done. And in terms of the comments which Councillor Kerr raised about the design of the on-street parking bay, that would get picked up as part of the Section 278 technical design, which we would cover there. So from our perspective, we feel that we do not have grounds to refuse this on highways grounds. We've worked with the applicant for the best part of 2 years, and with the appeal decision based on 50%, we don't feel we can substantiate a reason for a refusal on highways grounds.
You can, and thank you very much. And yes, sir.
I was just going to say this committee is probably aware of the appeal decision we're referring to, 220 Osmaston Road. It was an apartment scheme that had, it was allowed on appeal with 50% on-site provision. And just to say, yes, we can open up the cycle parking condition, speak to the applicant and the agent and look at the location of all the provision on the site.
They're nodding, they're not allowed to say anything, but they are nodding. We've just got a couple more in before you, Tim. Councillor Bolton first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just say from the outset that there's clearly been a lot of work done on this scheme, and I think everybody involved. I like the design, I like the scheme, and I think it is a site we ought to see developed. And I think it will enhance the area of Osmaston, but I think it has to be bearing in mind what the Speaker said to us, particularly regarding the traffic on Cotton Lane. I drive up there fairly frequently, and it's always chock-a-block with cars, and it was very difficult the time I last went. But can we have the plan up, James, just to see the access? Where are these 51 car parking spaces going to come? Are they coming out? I couldn't quite see accurately on the plan. Are the cars going to be coming out on Cotton Lane, or is it Russell Street?
On Cotton Lane, both. Sorry, both points of vehicular access are on Cotton Lane. There are two there presently.
Okay, well, I can perhaps see some difficulties with that, shall I say.
They look like curved crossings there, they're not there.
Thank you, Lucy. I know, or did I dream it, that they were going to make Russell Street or Cotton Lane a one-way system to try and help the manoeuvrability of the neighbourhood, particularly the people who live there and work there. I mean, it has been alluded to that some people park on Cotton Lane for the day and go to work. And I know that's caused some issues for the neighbourhood recently. I like the way we've got the car club. I like the environmental enhancements around the site. I think that's to be welcomed. I see on the bottom of page 38, under 3.10, when the site proposed is considered that they will appeal mostly to singletons and or couples. Well, there you are. If you've got 102 apartments, you could potentially get 204 cars. I think there is a problem, but I'm thinking of the worst scenario there, I think. The bottom of page, what have I written there? 48. Yes, I was pleased that they've taken consideration of the breeding birds and that no work will be undertaken during the time between the 1st of March due to possibly nesting birds. So as a member of the RSPB, I welcome that. Yeah, I just think this is a great scheme, but it could be a nightmare for parking.
Thanks. Do you want to come back on the parking bit? Yeah.
Yeah. During the life of this application, there has been a public consultation regarding changes to parking in the local area. However, colleagues in traffic management have confirmed recently that proposals have been dropped. At the moment, there is nothing substantial on the table to change. And with regards to the accesses, Councillor Kerr is correct. They are Bellmouth, and we are asking for them to go to pedestrian priority, which will also pick up as part of the section 278, which you would expect on a scheme which is likely to have more pedestrian movements than ever before. You have to remember what that scheme was, or what has been there previously. It was a Derbyshire constabulary. It was a very car-heavy site. I actually spoke to the facilities management at the constabulary to get them to gave me a lovely story, tell me all out how that site was. I'm satisfied that the level of traffic will not be any worse than how that site used to operate. In fact, it should be better.
Thank you very much. I can't remember who was next now. Matt?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, because I know the meeting's carrying on quite late. Totally accept the fact we need to supply housing, and the applicant's absolutely right to point out about 5-year supply and all the other things. And sometimes it can be argued that the harm outweighs that need and all the rest of it. But I think, you know, I'm the first sometimes to say that I believe that should we reject an application, that it could be defended in appeal, was my opinion. I think it's clear that this one, I don't think it's heading that way, but if it was to be refused, it would be allowed anyway. It's almost inevitable. That's probably no comfort to the public speaker, and I totally accept. He knows the area very, very well, and parking issues obviously exist around the city. Parking could be better, parking could be worse. I think it's a pragmatic view, really, that at least it's 50, at least it's the level that it's been provided at, and that probably again no consolation to the local resident. But you know, hopefully we can find a way forward, and the impact won't be as severe as the residents expect it to be, and I certainly hope that's the case. On parking and cars, then, Councillor Kerr mentioned about EV charging for bikes. I can't find anything anywhere in the reports that I've read about EV for cars. And I say that in the context of, obviously we're moving forward toward,
very excited.
We'll be moving forward to that very rapidly. And I just wonder if there's any discussions been had on that. The caveat being that I wouldn't support EV only bays removing the overall, you know, the overall mix. But yeah, there's a lack of that discussion, and we're talking about this is really environmentally friendly, this is a green development. Where's the EV charging, or is that something that's going to be delivered in the future, and has that been considered in terms of getting the electricity on site, etc.?
I understand there is some intention to provide EV charging. As you indicate, it won't be all spaces, but my understanding is there will be some.
But Chair, we need to be careful here, because say, for example, 12 EV charging bays are put in and only 3 of them are regularly used, that's going to reduce. So it's a balance. I'm not saying, I'm saying it needs to be considered, but it needs to be carefully implemented so that it doesn't reduce in real terms the parking for regular cars, because in the next 10 years we are going to see a complete, you know, fossil fuel cars will no longer exist. But in the meantime, within the life of this, you know, we need to balance that.
Thanks, Matt.
You can get dual-use bays. Remembering that this is private land, you could get dual-use bays. You get them in public car parks as well. They have a sign, and that I would expect the applicant to do something like that, so that effectively priority is given to the EV charging vehicles.
The applicants were nodding, by the way, when you were talking. I keep looking at them, and they are nodding at various things. So yeah. Tim, was it you that wanted to come in as well? Yep.
Yeah, just briefly. If parking is restricted on the street in the future, can we make it so this property can't get parking permits? Because I know that we've said that some are no-car developments.
Come in, Chris.
Essentially, if the development is constructed before the order comes in, or before an order is advertised, then that would become part of the parking order. If it's not there at such a time that the residents' parking comes forward, then it would not be part of it. But my understanding is that there was consultation with respect to residents' parking, and that was also rejected.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, because it's a mega difficult street to drive down, even on the best of days. And I'm really concerned that this will just really cause, you know, severe problems for the residents. Otherwise, I think it's going to be a fantastic looking development, and it will really improve the area. I understand the intensity things that were mentioned earlier, and the other development down the street's better, but being a site of this scale, like, you can't do that, I'm afraid. So, yeah, I am still worried about parking, which I'm bored of now, but...
John, quick one.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I like the development as well. I mean, it's been empty for a number of years. I can remember when that building went up. I noticed on the photographs showing Cotton Lane, there's some old wooden bollards in there that are to stop people parking on the land where the trees are. You'll see them on the right-hand side, look, going down. The new development, there needs to be bollards in, because the pending parking problem, well, potential pending parking problem, means that cars are going to be spilling over onto some of the landscaped areas. So it might be an idea to have concrete or some other form of bollards in as well. And I agree with Councillor Prosser. The permits, the residents ought to take that away, and the local councillors, and probably look again at a petitioning the local residents for parking permits in time, so that anybody buying one of those apartments or renting one, whatever, will know quite clearly you will not be getting a parking permit. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just want to add my 2 pence in this. Yes, we've gone through the parking bit, but over the last 2 or 3 years, we've had a lot of high-rise apartments come into this committee. And we've all said, it's a square box, it's a rectangular box, it's this, it looks like a prison cell. This, take my hat off to you guys, looks absolutely fantastic. It really is a lovely design with the green roofs, with the solar. You've covered everything, and the glass and everything. It looks really good, looks really good. So that's my 2 pence anyway. So move to the vote. Thank you, Councillor Bolton. With conditions that we've already... Yes.
I think we just need to make sure we're including...
We have moved to the vote, Councillor Kerr.
Just to make sure we include the comment from the Highways Officer that we're having pavements and not dropped curbed crossings, because that isn't included in the paperwork.
Yes, that's in the highways conditions. Yes, it is. We've moved to the vote. All those in favour of this application, please. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Councillor Prosser was a bit slow on that one, but he did get his left arm up. Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Mitter, for coming in and giving the residents' point of view. That application is granted. Thank you. We move on to item 7, potential future site visits. Paul, you've got all 4.
I actually don't think you need to see any of these. Rolls-Royce Submarines, this is reserved matters on the outline. We all know where Rainsway is. Come on, hurry up, James.
It's a big plan, that is, James.
We've got the Eagle Market, it's an outline application. It's the big one on Derby On, which is back. Having been through the Secretary of State, come out the other end, we've approved one. Now they're back with a revised scheme on there. You'll be able to see it from the street. Land east of Kingsway Boulevard, again, outline application. I think you can see it from the street. And 411 Burton Road, 10 apartments. Again, you can see it from the street scene. Can I just say, we will probably end up seeing a lot more schemes with less car parking than 1-for-1 in the city. And I think we need to embrace it because we're trying to encourage people out of their cars and onto their bikes and walking, and where it's sustainable, we'll be advising you that it's a sustainable location rather than requiring 200% car parking. Might be a training session.
Yes, Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. Just in terms of site visits, I don't think we need a visit, but if people are going along Burton Road, could they just consider the land levels for number 411 Burton Road, because it's part of that escarpment and it's still gently falling away to the rear of that property, and I think that may have implications that need to be considered.
Noted, Councillor Kerr. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, officers, for your attention to detail on everything. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, James, Stephen. Thank you very much. And Stephen. Thank you. See you next month. Goodbye. Thanks very much.